This is the Roots and All podcast, and I'm your host, Sarah Wilson. Join me as I talk about all aspects of gardening with some of the top horticulturists from around the world. In this episode, I'm joined by Susanna Daniels, CEO of Melanoma Focus, along with 3 horticulturists who have first-hand experience with skin cancer. As we face increasingly hot weather, we discuss the vital importance of sun safety for those working outdoors, why it matters, how to protect yourself, and the real risks of ignoring it.
Melanoma Focus is a national charity, and it's dedicated to providing help and support to melanoma patients as well as healthcare professionals. And also it has a remit of raising awareness of melanoma because it's the 5th most common cancer in the UK. And raising awareness is really critical, a part of our work and advocacy work, because nearly 9 in 10 cases of melanoma are potentially preventable.
I mean, I think people will be surprised to start with that it is so common. And in terms of melanoma itself, what does that encompass?
So melanoma is when the pigment-producing cells called melanocytes, they grow out of control. And that can be sort of with lots of cancers where cells will grow out of control. And majority of cases, it's down to UV damage. So that UV can be from the sun or sunbeds. But from the sun, it's that repetitive damage that is really problematic. So the sun will damage the skin cells, so the DNA in skin cells, and that can lead to genetic changes and mutations. But your body's really clever and it can repair some of that damage. However, it's that unrepaired damage and these mutations that can build up over time, and that increases your risk of melanomas. So people won't go in the sun and sort of get a melanoma straight away. It's that repetitive damage if your body doesn't repair itself. And there's no point sort of thinking, oh, well, I've always been in the sun, so therefore there's no point sort of protecting my skin now. That's not the case, because at some point it might be that your body sort of doesn't repair itself and, you'll get a malignancy or get a cancer. So that's why it's just important to start looking after your skin as soon as you can. But yes, more than 5 sunburns in your lifetime, which isn't very much, will double your risk of melanoma skin cancer.
Yeah, and is it more likely to be diagnosed at a particular age?
So the likelihood of getting melanoma, because it's that sort of repetitive damage, increases with increasing age. However, in the 15 to 44 age group, it's the 2nd most common cancer in males and the 3rd most common cancer in females. So in your sort of workforce, it accounts for about, in the under 50s, 25%, a quarter of them, melanomas happen in that age group. But yes, because of that repetitive damage to the skin, it is more common as you get older.
And could anybody be diagnosed with it? I'm guessing there are risk factors that increase your chance of being diagnosed with it.
So anyone can get a melanoma, but you're a higher risk if you've got a paler skin, if you've got more moles on your body, pale eyes. So there are certain risk factors, but that doesn't mean to say that you can't get a melanoma if you've got dark skin, because you can. You're just less likely.
Okay. And in terms of professions, that might be generalising too much, but do you see anybody from any particular walk of life or people who are just maybe outside more? Is it more prevalent amongst those groups?
So we did a survey with the horticultural workforce, and 71% reported being sunburnt at least once a year. And we did a similar survey this year with the agricultural workers, and 77% of workers said that they sunburnt at least once a year. So if you remember, I said that more than 5 sunburns in your lifetime, so that's not just once a year, will double your risk of melanoma. We've also did a national survey this year, so that's higher. So outdoor workers seems to be that about 3/4 of them get sunburnt at least once a year, compared to the Great British public, where it's about 50% are getting sunburnt. And I think, that's working outside and perhaps not understanding the risks.
Yeah. And obviously the risks are there, but you can mitigate them if you work outside. What is the advice regards protecting yourself from sunburn?
What we would recommend is wearing a high factor sunscreen. So that's with an SPF of 30 or above, and with a 4 or a 5-star rating, which is a rating you see on the back of a bottle. What's really important is to reapply. We never apply enough sunscreen, and we don't recommend the once daily sunscreens as well. They're actually not recommended, and people can't buy them in Australia because anything that prevents you from reapplying sunscreen is just not permitted in Australia. So the first thing is about sunscreen and using that and reapplying it. And then the next thing is about seeking shade in the heat of the day. And if that's not possible, it's also about covering up. So not going shirtless, try and covering your shoulders, wearing a wide brimmed hat, and wearing UV protected sunglasses. So they're the sort of really key things to protect yourselves, protect your skin. Your skin's your largest organ on your body.
And is there any workplace legislation around it? I mean, if you are working outside and you can't escape it, do you have the right to say, no, I can't work out in this?
Well, employers do have a duty of care for their employees, and they do have a legal obligation to address safety in the workplace. And that includes UV radiation, because that's an occupational hazard. And so, yes, there are sort of guidelines there. So employers should be supporting their staff because it is an occupational hazard if you're working outside.
If you had any concerns and you thought perhaps, oh, I've got a mold that's maybe changed, or I'd like to go and get checked out anyway, even if I don't have a particular area of concern, how would people go about that?
So we recommend that people monitor their skin probably about once a month. And you're looking for a new or a changing mole or lesion. That's the most important sort of things to look out for. Or something that just looks a little bit odd compared to other moles or lesions on your body. And if you see that, contact your GP. They may ask you to send some photos in, which is quite normal practice. And that can go through a secure messaging system, and they may send that on. There are various sort of pathways where it might go to a consultant dermatologist, skin doctor to review that. If you're asked to come in, that doesn't mean you have a melanoma or a skin cancer. It just means that they want to have a look. And in most cases, it will be nothing. But the best thing to do is to get things checked out at an early stage, because it's much easier to treat at an early stage. Melanoma isn't just skin cancer. It sadly can progress to other parts of the body if it's not treated early. But in most cases, as I said, there won't be anything to be concerned about. If your GP says that they don't feel it's anything, but you notice it changes later down the line, you are your own advocate, and contact your GP again, because it might be that it's changed at that point, and ask for it to be reviewed again. So you do need to monitor your skin.
Is there a fairly standard treatment pathway that people could expect to follow?
It really depends on what stage of melanoma. And we've got a wealth of information and frequently asked questions on our website. And that sort of helps people. But at an early stage, surgery, it would be the treatment of choice. And if it's caught at a later stage, then there are other treatments such as immunotherapies, and which can be used to treat melanoma. But as I said, you really do want to look after your skin and make sure that you contact your GP if you have any concerns.
And if people wanted to find out more about Melanoma Focus or about melanoma, where could they go?
Do check out our website, melanomafocus.org. We are PIFTIC accredited, which means we are a trusted patient information provider. So all of our information, we're constantly reviewing it. We've got information on early melanomas, how to look after your skin, how to monitor your skin, what to look out for. And then we've got a whole treatment pathway as well for those that are diagnosed with melanoma.
So you mentioned sunscreen as a prevention. Is that something that we should be wearing every day?
It's only really necessary to wear sunscreen when the UV index is above moderate, so 3 or above. The UV index is a measure of how strong the sun's rays are. And so the higher the UV index, the higher the strength of those rays are. So we recommend wearing sunscreen. It's normally from sort of May to October, but it's when the UV index is above 3. You can look out for the UV index on most weather apps, and it will show you what the UV index is for that day. But that's really critical. It's not about wearing sunscreen when it's really hot, because actually we've all got burnt on cloudy days. It's really about the strength of the UV index rather than just looks like a really sort of sunny day. So that's the most important factor.
Thanks, Susanna. Next up, I'm speaking with Rachel Reynolds, Kimberley and Jenny Warner about their experiences.
Yeah, I'm Paul Kimberley. I'm 63 years old and I design gardens for a living. I haven't done this for my whole career, but I guess my experience with cancer was when I was 32, so quite a long time ago, where I had, as it was diagnosed, a malignant melanoma. And the interesting part of this story is twofold. The first bit is I had no idea I even had a mole on my back because it was right at the base of my neck. And it was my wife who said to me, I think you need to get that checked. And I really didn't know what she was talking about. So I went along and got it checked through my company medical. And the second part of the story, which is interesting and was a little bit frightening at the time, was I went to a guy on Harley Street, a specialist, who said, no, I don't think that's cancer, but we'll send you for a biopsy anyway. So off I went for my biopsy. And that came back, and it came back with a story of you have a malignant melanoma. So I was rushed in to have it removed and successfully. So that's basically my story, which was one of discovery. And secondly, even the professionals in that day and age not really thinking it was anything. And I say this to everybody I meet. If you have a mole that you don't like the look of, go get it checked. Simple as that. It doesn't take long. And doctors are very willing, I've found in this day and age, to perform those sort of checks for you.
Yeah, excellent advice. Rachel, can I jump to you next? Can you tell me your story?
Yeah, I am 58 now and I'm a garden designer, and my experience with cancer, it's not melanoma, and I know it's Melanoma Focus month or week, but I have had various basal cell carcinomas and a squamous cell carcinoma. Now, basal cell carcinomas are considered, in cancer terms, they're not very scary, but they are disfiguring, and squamous cell carcinomas can spread, so they are more worrying in cancer terms. But the problem with basal cell carcinomas is that they can often get missed, and also they are quite often the ones that are associated with sun damage, and they're quite often on your face. And they're quite often, you get them as you get a lot older, but you can, if you're fair skinned, get them at a younger age. So my experience is more sort of cumulative because I've had multiple bits of my face chopped off at various times, and I've had to take quite a lot of time off from work for various appointments, and had light treatment on my face. And like anybody else that's had that sort of experience, I have to wear sunblock always and never sit in the sun. So it is an ever-present threat. And then the squamous cell, again, is similar in that they don't get too worried about it because 5% spread and most don't, but 5% when it's you still feels quite like a big percentage. And again, they chop bits off your face or your wherever it is. So it's like quite a major sort of thing at the time, had skin grafts and stuff like that. So I just wanted to come and share my experience because lots of people feel that they're not that serious, but in actual fact, cumulatively, they can have quite a big effect on your life.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. And Jenny, how about you? What's your story?
Very similar to Rachel, actually. I've had a fair few bits chopped off my face and head. So I'm 37 years old. I'm a botanical horticulturalist at Kew Gardens, and I work under glass with tropical plants. And this was a few years back, just after COVID. I noticed a very odd spot on my forehead, just near my hairline, and it seemed to sort of get bigger, turned red, was kind of itchy every now and again, occasionally bled a little bit. So a couple of months passed and I thought, you are not a spot, and went off to the GP, and they were very, very quick to get me in, to get me seen. And in spite of the fact it wasn't a huge spot, they take quite a large area. So they essentially sort of take an eye shape around it and then sort of pull it in. And so that was my first one. And that was essentially like having half your face lifted on the NHS because your eyebrows kind of up in the air for a few weeks afterwards until the skin relaxes. And I've had a few more taken off since then, which have proved not to be basal cell carcinomas, but that one was. And yeah, I'm very pale as well. I have blue eyes, blonde hair. So it's really important to wear sun cream and hats whenever you can.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you all for sharing your stories, all slightly different, but all completely relevant in this context, obviously. And one of the things that when you were talking that I was thinking was, how much did you actually know about these types of cancers before you were diagnosed? Because even now I'm doing the research, but it seems like quite a broad topic. And I've got a feeling a lot of people will come into this subject with not actually that much information.
I knew about melanoma, and you're looking for sort of moles that are changing shape and change from the brown that then you're familiar with and stuff like that. But what I didn't know was what Jenny was saying as well, is that none of mine looked like that. Basal cells were like scaly patches that was a spot type thing. And the squamous cell, it's like nothing you've ever seen before. So it's like that they can not be what you're looking for, if you see what I mean. You're looking for a brown mold that changes shape, but they can be a scaly patch. They can be a little dot. The squamous cell that I had was named Susan Boyle because it did. It looked like a boil, and I thought I'd got a massive, great big spot on my nose, but it wasn't a spot, and it hurt. It hurt a lot. So that's my experience.
How about you, Paul and Jenny?
I had no knowledge whatsoever about melanomas. And since then, I guess I've gained a lot of knowledge. And each year I go for a check, which is done at a local GP. And if I need anything in between that, then I just call and, go down. But no knowledge, but you soon gain knowledge, that's for sure.
Yeah. How about you, Jenny? Was it a learning curve for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't really know what I was looking at for quite a while, really. I kind of wish I'd gotten seen sooner. Maybe it would have been a smaller area than they took. But for the rest of them, as soon as there was something odd, even when they were very tiny, I went in. Paul, was it very easy to get that organised, the yearly check? Because I've had that recommended for me as well, and I think that's a really good idea.
It's something that the hospital said to me is, you need to use your GP for a yearly check. As soon as I mentioned it to my GP, and I've changed GPs many times since then because of moving around, they've all been extremely helpful. So what it involves is every year I go to the doctors and explain what the situation is, and they look me over, all over. And if they're not sure, they recommend me on to somebody. So I've often been referred again onto somebody, which thankfully hasn't come to anything. But I think it's an area where you really do need to see a specialist in the end, but your doctor will get you to that point if he feels that it's necessary.
When you were saying, Rachel, about taking time off work, and Rachel and Paul, I guess this is more relevant to you, but obviously a lot of people listening and a lot of people in horticulture are going to be self-employed. This must have had an impact on earnings. Has it made you a bit more cautious going forward about things like sickness cover?
Yeah, at the time when I was getting most of my treatment, I was actually employed, and every time I had to go to the hospital, I had to take it as unpaid leave. And then I became self-employed again. And yeah, it takes time out because I'm down in Sussex, but I'm treated in London because that's where I was when I started my treatment. I didn't want to change. But the preventative, like the checks that Paul's talking about, there's also the light therapy, dynamic light therapy, where they put some cream on your face. And then either they shine a light on the spot that they're treating, or you go out in the sun for 2 hours. And the cream makes the light center on the sun damaged skin, and that all gets frazzled. And so they're taking away the skin that's likely to develop into basal cell carcinoma. And so it's preventative, but it's time consuming. I had many of those. And it's very painful as well. So those sorts of treatments, coupled with everything else, yes, took a lot of time out of my working year.
Paul, how did you find it?
In terms of insurances, as you mentioned there, I've always looked through any insurances that we have about work to make sure there's sufficient cover. I've never needed to use it, but you're right. It is, I think, for self-employed people, absolutely imperative that you cover yourself with these sort of situations, because you never know where these sort of diagnoses can go in the end in terms of treatments and costs and all the rest of it. But in essence, I've always been very lucky in that the doctors through the National Health Service I've never needed to go privately on any of this sort of stuff. The National Health Service have picked this up very, very quickly, and I can't commend them highly enough.
Excellent. Well, that's good to hear. Actually, that was going to be another question was, how quickly did you manage to get treatment? But actually, it sounds like you all accessed it relatively quickly.
Sorry to jump in again, but it's actually treated down to a 2-week wait, cancer treatment. So you do generally get really quick treatment on that.
Good. That's good to know. So you touched on it as well already, but perhaps you could elaborate a little bit. What do you do individually now to kind of protect yourselves going forwards?
I'll go first, shall I? I've got no hair, so a hat. It's kind of minimum factor 50 everywhere I go. And, I also live in Edinburgh now, which you would think is not massively sunny, but it doesn't really matter whether the sun's out or not. I think this is quite an important message that the consultants I've always met with have said, which is it's UV, and it doesn't have to be just a sunny day giving you this UV. And cream, protection, long sleeves, just minimize your body's contact with the sun as much as you can. It's as simple as that, even down to sunglasses and things like that. So if you're out and about, which, we all are in our industry, you really do have to think carefully. And I think you see so many guys on sites who just don't think like this, which is the worrying thing. And I have always taken the view of just telling people what happened to me and making sure I've got some cream that they can have if they need it. And hopefully they start a habit. That's the important thing. You make this a habit.
Completely echo what Paul's just said. And also things like all of mine are on the right side of my face and my things. And I have always done a lot of driving and I can feel the sun, and the front windscreen is protected, UV protected, and the side ones are not. And so that light coming in from the side when you're driving is also, even if it's through grass, it's really important to protect yourself against the sun, even in that circumstances. But the rest of what Paul said, long sleeves, hats, staying in the shade, cream, running up to people when I've forgotten my cream and saying, can I have some of your cream, and doing what Paul does, moaning at the guys on site because they think it doesn't affect them. So I always get my cream out and make them put some on.
How about you, Jenny? Is it tricky for you because of the environment that you're working in?
I'm kind of lucky because I work with tropical plants in the main zone that I work in, and therefore they're understory, so the shading's actually on quite a lot for them. So for me, it's fantastic. But also getting to and from work and walking around site, we do have sun cream provided by Q, which is fantastic. I mean, one of the things I see, particularly in people coming into the profession younger, sort of in their early 20s, I've seen a bit of a kind of tanning culture where people are like, oh, look, I've got my boot tan now, and you can see the line where the socks are and that kind of thing. And I'd really love to see that come to an end, particularly when the cream is provided and that advice is there. But yeah, I echo everything that's been said above. Hats, sun cream, cover up as much as you can, and work in a shaded glasshouse.
And if anybody that was listening did have, a mark that they just weren't sure about, and perhaps, there's that thought that it's nothing, or if I go to the doctor, I'm just going to be making a nuisance of myself, or I'm sure it's nothing to worry about. If anyone was listening, what would you say to them?
I would say two things. One, don't Google it. Two, go and see your doctor. Simple as that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny that people sort of show me their spots and things. And of course, I always say go to the doctor because I don't know. I'm not a doctor. So therefore, I'm never ever going to say to somebody, oh, that's fine. But anything that looks a bit weird is probably something. So yeah, get it checked.
Jenny, what would you say?
Yeah, same. Absolutely. If you think it looks weird, you know your body better than anyone. Get it checked out.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. And I really hope that this does, even if just one person was listening and went to the doctor off the back of it and, had their mind put at rest, it's kind of done its job. So I've reached the end of my questions. Has anybody got anything else that they want to say or that they feel might have been missed out?
I have got one thing that I wanted to say about looking after yourself and protecting yourself. In our industry, a lot of companies, landscaping companies, provide uniform and they provide a woolly hat, but they don't always provide a sun hat. And not all companies provide sun cream either. So I just think that we've all got responsibilities and things like marquees to work under when you're laying paving and stuff like that. Sometimes people are having to work in the blazing sun and they're not given the protection. So I think it's responsibility and an awareness needs to be with the employer as well as the individual employees.
Yeah, very good point. Anybody else got anything they want to add?
The only thing I would add, which is a bit obvious, we hear a lot about climate change and how the world is warming. Well, QED with that comes, I think, a greater chance that you could have some sort of skin cancer just by the very fact of what's going on around us. So take care and take precautions.
Yeah, excellent. Jenny, anything you wanted to add?
Just all of the above. If you've got anything weird, get it checked out and do look after yourself. And, there's no shame in looking after yourself. Don't let yourself get peer pressured into getting a tan or anything else like that. Just think long term, look after your skin.
A huge thank you to Susanna Daniels and our 3 guests for sharing their insight and experiences. Your voices are a powerful reminder of the importance of staying sun safe. You can download or listen to the podcast direct from the website rootsandall.co.uk. Please also check out my Patreon, where you can make a one-off donation or take out a monthly subscription to help support the podcast. Because if you enjoy the show, please help it continue. I also have a GoFundMe where you can make a one-off donation. Even a one-off donation of £1 helps, and I'll be really grateful for your support. So please go to Patreon or GoFundMe and search for Roots and All Podcast.